Hi. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why the war on drugs is maybe not as good a thing as the intentions behind it were. And a little bit about how I came to come to that realization, as well as why I became passionate about it, in fact. So I'm an oceanographer by training and by profession, and my whole life I've been a scientist and very curious about my own mind, about how people operate in the world, how the world works. And through that kind of curiosity has sparked me to go to Burning Man. And through my Burning Man experience, not to be a stereotypical, but I tried ecstasy for the first time. And it was a very profound experience for me. And I'm a very thoughtful person, and so when I got to experience that, I was able to actually connect with my heart and the people around me in a very profound and novel way. And this led me onto this kind of thought path of, well, if society's been telling me that this thing is so bad for me and for society, what else is it wrong about? And so I started experimenting with other substances and doing my own research and looking into the studies that have been done on these substances to try and get down to the bottom of this and cut through all of the rhetoric. So I'm not going to talk too much about, because most people know a lot about marijuana and the negative sides of the war on drugs in terms of, you know, our massive prison population, drug cartels, and the fact that, you know, in this process you're not actually helping the people that need help, you're just making them criminals, and then you're just creating a system where the government loses credibility because you're creating a system where people are just going to continue breaking the law. So most people know about that aspect of this issue. But the substances that I'm interested in communicating to you about are the psychedelic substances. So LSD, mushrooms, MDMA, also known as ecstasy. There's so many different compounds, and scientists and chemists are coming up with new ones every year that the government is just trying to get them outlawed faster than they can create them. And actually a friend of ours made a really interesting point. He said, at some point they're just going to have to outlaw a state of mind, then the substances, because we're creating new substances every year and they can't outlaw them fast enough. So I'd like to do a little poll right now. So I'm going to have you guys all close your eyes, and I'm going to ask you a couple questions, and I'd like you to raise your hands, and then I'm going to tell you what the group shows. So please close your eyes right now. All right, please raise your hand if you have done marijuana before. Okay, put your hands down. That was pretty much everyone in the room. Okay, next one. Please raise your hand if you have tried ecstasy or MDMA before. All right, put your hands down. That was maybe 60 to 70% of the room. Okay, next one. LSD? Okay, down. That was about a 50%. Okay, now we're getting a little bit more interesting. Ayahuasca? All right, hands down. That was maybe 5% of the room. Okay, so please close your eyes. Or please open your eyes now.
Can you elaborate on ayahuasca?
Yes. So, you would know if you tried ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is a very, 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 very strong psychedelic from the Amazon jungle. It's used in ceremonies down there. It lasts for 8 to 10 hours, where you're in a complete full visionary state. The shamans down there lead groups through these visionary states. And what's been really interesting about studies that have been done on ayahuasca is they've been using that as a tool to help heal people's psychological issues, whether from their past and also through it's actually been shown to be a really effective tool for getting people over addictions, including heroin, alcoholism, because what it's doing is you're actually getting down to the real root of the problem. The problem is not alcoholism, it's not overeating, it's not abusing drugs, it's something else that people are trying to escape from or self-medicate. And so this ayahuasca, and there are several other compounds, ibogaine is another powerful psychedelic similar to ayahuasca that's from Africa, used in a similar way. So some of the other studies that have, in my process of trying to understand more about more about the science behind this stuff and the medical uses for these substances. One of the most interesting ones, and that's gotten a lot more press recently, is using MDMA in therapy for people that have post-traumatic stress disorder. So right now, 22% of veterans commit suicide. And post-traumatic stress disorder is just rampant. And what's really fascinating is that there's a group called MAPS, which stands for the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, and they've been doing a lot of this science. And they've shown that after 2 sessions of this MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, they've been able to get 83% success rate of curing PTSD. Not on drugs for the rest of your life, not having to go to therapy for the rest of your life. 83% success rate after 2 therapy sessions.
Therapy's expensive.
And so it's, yeah. And then what's really, and other really interesting studies that have been done are for cluster headaches, which I had never even heard of, but it's a completely debilitating problem that a very small percentage of the population has, but it's not even really a headache. It's just complete head pain, and this current medicine has very little ways of combating this kind of pain. And these people go into these states for hours, days, and it's completely debilitating. And I was like, I think there was a little documentary done about it, and I was watching someone that was going through one of these episodes, and they were just writhing around on the floor, and there was nothing that anyone could do. But recently, they found out that if one of these people that have cluster headaches takes psilocybin, which is from the active psychoactive compound in mushrooms, they take that, it cures them of cluster headaches for 3 months. Same with LSD. And so the community right now that has these problems, it's a godsend. Because there was nothing else that could help them. Other uses for these things is reducing end-of-life anxiety. So people that are chronically ill, very end-of-life, often can take some of these substances and really have a deep, profound experience where they kind of get to see their life from a different perspective and connect with the people around them in different ways and really come to a place where they're at peace before they go. So these are just a couple of the studies that I found the most interesting. What I was going to say is that the reason why the MDMA-assisted psychotherapy works for PTSD is really fascinating, is that the way most people, at least me, think of the way memory works is like, okay, well, if something happens, I write it down on a piece of paper and I put it in a file cabinet. And then when I want to remember it, I go back to the file cabinet and take the piece of paper out, I read it, I'm like, okay, I remember it, and then I put it back in. So that's not actually how our memory works. What happens is, it's not actually file cabinets in the head. It's more like you write it down, you put it in the file cabinet, when you come back, you read it, and then you rewrite it. So every time you remember something, you're rewriting the memory, and it's affected by whatever is going on around you. So in the case of PTSD, when people have a traumatic event, those emotions are built into that memory, and so when they read them, they recall the memory, those emotions come back up again, they get all upset again, and then when they rewrite the memory, they rewrite it again with the emotional trauma. And so the way that MDMA assists them is that when they have them take the MDMA, which is known as an empathogen, which makes you feel connected, it makes you feel empathy, it makes you feel love for the people around you. And so when they recall the traumatic memory, they, when they rewrite it again, it's not with the same emotional trauma. So then you basically just, they obviously still remember it, but it doesn't have the emotional trauma. What's another interesting thing about MDMA is that when they first started using MDMA, or when they first discovered MDMA and its effects, they were using it as a way to for marriage counseling. So they had people that were having marriage problems. They had them both take MDMA, and then they would be able to actually have a deep, heartfelt communication and work out a lot of their stuff in a way that they might not normally be able to do on an everyday basis. So back in the early 70s, and then since then, all of these compounds have been made illegal, and they've all been all the ones that I've just mentioned are all Schedule 1. And what that means is that, by definition, they are prone to abuse, which the word abuse is never really clearly defined in there in the documentation, and then that there's no medical use for them. And so it becomes this interesting chicken and the egg or catch-22 kind of situation, because so we say these things don't have any medical use and that they're Schedule 1, and so there's a horrible amount of paperwork that you have to get through to be able to do research on this stuff. Because there's no medical use, but then you can't get the paperwork to actually test if there is a medical use. So it becomes this huge problem. Even to the point where Scientific American, which is a really well respected journal, recently, back in February, put out an article saying that they're calling for the end of the ban on psychedelic substances research. So that was a pretty big deal. The next thing I wanted to go over briefly is the safety of these substances, the ones that I've just been mentioning, the psychedelics. Because the war on drugs has said, okay, let's lump everything into the same pile. All drugs are awful. Dare to stay off drugs, the whole thing. Prohibition all over. A really interesting study, like meta-analysis study, coming out of England, did an analysis of all these different studies of the safety of these kinds of drugs, or all different kinds of substances that people are that use, and they made this like one metric that measured the psychological, the physical harm that a person can do to themselves, and then the harm that being on that substance can cause others. And so they made this really clear, nice bar graph. I like clear infographics, where you've got, harmful, the most harmful substances on one end, and the least harmful at the other end. And can anyone guess what the most harmful one was?
Alcohol.
Bingo. Alcohol. Next to that?
Cigarettes. Heroin.
Heroin. Next to that? Crack cocaine. Next to that? I think it was a methamphetamine of some kind. Then in the middle, cannabis. And then way all the way at the other end, mushrooms, LSD, and ecstasy. And so I can't, being a scientist and looking at this whole situation, I can't, it boggles my mind in a way that, but that's just me kind of assuming that the system should be logical, and it's not. But I understand that our society, and I just listened to a podcast recently about This American Life, and their topic was I was so high, and it was all about people doing basically stupid stuff while they were either stoned or on, I think there was one guy who was on mushrooms and something else. And what it made me think of was that we've created a culture where people are using these substances in ways that are stupid. Like they're just doing it because they're trying to escape from some situation that they're in. They're trying to, maybe because they're bored, I don't know. But the thing is that creating a prohibition isn't really solving anything. You're telling a teenager not to have sex or to drink, what do you think they're going to do? You know, you're just setting people up to lose. And instead of creating a system where you help people that need help, you're creating criminals out of them, and you're undermining the whole system. And so what I'm more interested in culturing is not only encouraging people to go out and do their own experimentation in a mindful way. Because when we all bring mindfulness to everything that we do, we're doing it in ways that actually heal ourselves. And in my own experience, I had one of the most profound experiences in my life on a very powerful psychedelic in the last year, and it's allowed me to be able to connect with people and like see the world for what it is, and see the beauty in the world, and see that I have a way to make an impact, and to just, you know, I care so much more deeply about people than I ever have before in my entire life. And it's something that the world clearly needs more of. We need more compassion, we need more understanding, we need more mindfulness. And through that process, I've gotten into yoga a lot more. You know, I've started my own yoga practice. I'm becoming a yoga teacher because I wanted to take what I've learned from these experiences and share them with people, and to bring mindfulness into everything that I do. So I firmly believe that if we start treating people like adults and expecting them to act like adults, we can change things. Because if we expect someone's going to act like a child, they're probably going to act like a child. But if you expect them to act like an adult, maybe they'll surprise you. And this isn't so far-fetched. You know, Mothers Against Drunk Driving started their campaign in 1980, and they take credit for cutting the amount of drunk driving down in that time by half. You know, so this isn't so far-fetched that we can create a culture of mindfulness, so that we're not just going and doing drinking or any kind of, you know, eating, gambling, anything that people tend to use as a way to escape. So I just want to leave you with, you know, be curious. There's so much more out there, and there's so many different ways to connect and to be in awe of everything in this world. And it's a beautiful thing, and not something that we should be scared of. Thank you.